and Vidisha to begin with the next session.
Thank you so much, Nisha.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dhun. I, Vidisha Tanna, welcome you all to our third and final conversation in the series for today, creating an inclusive environment for persons with disability, with Dr. Kavita Murigkar. I take this opportunity to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Kavita Murigkar, who is an architect and an associate professor at the BN College of Architecture or BNCA Pune. Ma'am has done pioneering work in promoting people centric and inclusive design education and practice in the architectural fraternity. Dr. Murugkar has set up the Universal Design Research and Training Center at BCNA and is identified as one of the most experienced universal access specialists in India. Ma'am is also the founder of Design Bridge Foundation, a social enterprise dedicated to creation of accessible built environments for the marginalized. Dr. Murugkar is the recipient of the Universal Design Award 2014 for her contribution in promoting accessibility in the built environment. Ma'am has extensively worked with the government under the Accessible India campaign to create universally accessible design infrastructure, and buildings across the country. Moving towards a brief introduction to the notion of accessible design. Disability is defined as a condition or function judged to be significantly impaired relative to the usual standard of an individual group. The term is used to refer to individual functioning, including physical impairment. Persons with impairments are increasingly entering the realm of service. They, like the able bodied peers, perceive a need in their communities and want to help make the world a better place for everyone, whether it's teaching kids to read, maintaining trails, or assisting the elderly. People with disabilities contribute by remaining autonomous in their homes and boosting public society. The world of service can be challenging for those with impairments. Barriers are frequently created unintentionally and arise from a combination of fear, anxiety, and ignorance. Training, technical support, collaboration, and the development of inclusive practices, teamwork, and communication are all used to break down these barriers. Inclusion is not like a light switch that simply gets turned on and off. It is more like a dimmer switch that you push forward into the light with intentionality, focus, and performance metrics. It is a journey, not a simple checklist. Therefore, in order to truly build an inclusive atmosphere for people with disabilities, we must learn how to put good intentions into action. In this conversation, we intend to discuss some of these salient aspects. Before we begin, we'll be enabling the chat box in the last 10 minutes. Please post your questions then. And now presenting to you a short video of ma'am's work. What an
What an
incredible
incredible
video.
video.
Looking forward
Looking
to
forward
hear
to your
about it more from ma'am. Thank you everyone for joining in. Now I'd like to call upon our faculty moderator Apurva Thakur and our speaker Dr. Kavita Murigkar to commence the session.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Vidisha.
Thank you.
Welcome, Kavita ma'am. It's such an honor to have you here. To just very quickly introduce ma'am and my fan following with ma'am is I have seen ma'am speak at a conference that I was attending, and I was completely stunned by the work that ma'am has done. And again, once again, I have goosebumps, ma'am. I mean, the video that was screened, it's exceptional, the work you're doing. So I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much. So let me quickly begin. I'm sure the audience is waiting. The first question for today, ma'am, is that whenever anybody talks about disability now, we talk about accessibility, right? And you have identified as an inclusive design specialist. So could you throw some light upon what and who is an inclusive design specialist, and what is universal design, and what really is accessibility, ma'am?
Yeah. So thank you so much. First of all, I must express my sheer delight to be in this, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary conference. Such kind of exchanges across disciplines is so much the need of the hour, especially when we are looking at, some very fundamental, reforms that must happen to our society to, make it a more inclusive place for all. And being given the opportunity to talk between architects is routine, but to talk between lawyers is certainly a special moment. So I must express my gratitude to the institute, and especially to Professor Apurva for keeping me in your mind and giving me this opportunity to speak and share today. Yeah, it's always so much, a pleasure to speak about universal design. I'm a strong proponent of universal design. And there is so much, constantly talked about accessibility amongst the groups who are, kind of really concerned about it. Your question is really apt, that what is accessibility, what is universal design, and what connection does it have to disability? So it's really important to understand these concepts very clearly, so that we actually are able to apply them and integrate them into whatever we do, whatever we create. So I'm going to be it's going to be kind of a multitasking. I'm going to be also showing a presentation with some visuals, so that you can understand what I'm talking about. And you've been listening to conversation since morning, so maybe this will be a little visual break for all the participants as well. So let me share the screen. And I'm going to be starting with, questioning, what is access and how is it related to disability? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, yes. So like you asked, Professor Apurva, yes, I mean, access is very much, associated always with the environment. And when we talk about the environment, it is not just the physical environment, but much more. So I'm talking about environment in a broader, perspective. And when we talk about access, certainly the concern is that, disability is created, and what is the role of access in creating the disability? And, access, the denial to access happens in the environment. So per se, what is the role of environment in creating disability? So is most of the times, as per the, if you look at the evolution of, the whole concept of disability, it all started with, the charity model. And then when it went on to the medical model of understanding disability as the person's impairment that is limiting his functionality, his performance, his participation in the society. And eventually, when it gradually the concept of disability evolved to the social model of disability, and then now to the human rights model of disability, this whole focus has come on to how the environment is actually playing a role in creating disability, and whether is the disability is a creation of the person because of his impairment, and very little can be done about it, or whether it is the environment that is actually the disabling agent. When we also talk about access, we need to understand this whole question of spatial justice, because eventually, if we understand access as the means to, achieve spatial justice at any level, right from the building level to, say, the city level, then what are the things that actually limit or breach this partial justice for somebody is something, again, a very, very core issue related to access. And so this associating access with partial justice just amplifies the whole meaning of access and its impact and its implication. And of course, it needs to be connected eventually to social inclusion, because partial justice, when provided, can definitely increase or can enhance social inclusion. So again, access and its connection with the social inclusion is something that is important. Also, when we talk about denial of access, disability is created is something that we just discussed. But then, is it only the disability that is created, or are we also creating negative identities through the denial of access? So access as a means of creating negative identities, and these negative identities not just reinforce the pain of not being a part of the mainstream, but also kill a person gradually, like slow poison a person, and take away his willpower to live, to fight, to sustain, etc. So it is an extremely I would say a huge mental health issue also, that becomes a virtue of not providing or providing access. Access also involves challenging the notion of the normal or the average, which is generally considered in the design of an environment. So when I say it is an environment, it could be a product, it could be a service, or it could be an physical space. So it could be the architecture of the place. And when we look at access from this perspective, then certainly, the whole convention of focusing on the able-bodied so-called normal person becomes a big question mark. And there is certainly a thought-provoking kind of a debate on whether we should design for the average or the normal who actually does not exist, and provide access for probably the least common denominator in the society, so that the accessibility is extended to all. So access in terms of what is the reference to provide access, and also this question of diversity or disability. So whether disability has to be looked at as a special condition, or is disability universal, and so access is universal. So if we understand disability as a diverse condition of being, it could be diversity in terms of the age, the gender, the physical characteristics, the appearance, the ability, etc. So if disability is just one another form of diversity, then should we be really looking at access from the point of view of disability, or access from the point of view of diversity is another question that we need to address. And if we really think that impairment is not really the reason for creating a disability, and it is in fact the barrier that when encountered by a person who has an impairment, that disability is created, then certainly it really becomes very evident that an impairment, when given an accessible environment, creates inclusion. So the production of disability is more of a social and environmental construct. And if access is the means to challenge disability, or to remove, or to reduce disabilities, then certainly an accessible environment is the only solution. Also, since the creation of architecture and the infrastructure is the main culprit in creating the disability, and it has been unsympathetic to needs of the persons with disabilities, this whole viewpoint of looking at persons with disabilities as abnormal and special has created different types of forms of, or different understanding of access as special conditions, right? And thus overshadowing the role of built environment as an agent of empowerment for persons with disabilities. And when I say the built environment, I'm just talking about general built environment. I'm not talking about special built environments like special schools or special rehab centers or special housing schemes, etc., etc. I'm just talking about the general built environment that we all use. Right. So access has the power, architecture has the power to act as an empowerment agent for persons with disabilities, with accessibility ingrained into it. And when we talk about barriers, and if we know that barriers are the real issue in limiting access, then we also need to understand what are the different types of barriers. So most of the times we think of barrier in physical terms, but it is not just the physical and architectural barriers, but it is the informational and communication barriers. These are attitudinal barriers, social barriers, technological barriers, as well as organizational barriers. So including the legal barriers, and all these types of barriers coexist in a space, and access is a condition of denial of participation and equal opportunity because of a mixture of such kind of barriers. And then what is let's shift a little bit from accessibility to universal design, because Apurva ma'am, you asked about this question. So let's quickly look at what is universal design, and let's relate it to accessibility later and understand what is the difference. So universal design is basically a design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to a greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, gender, ability, etc. Right? So universal design is a design approach that basically caters to inclusion of all kinds of people, It is a concept that can achieve physical, social, economic, and cultural inclusion, as well as sustainability. That is a key concern in today's time. And it is also a process that can enable and empower a diverse population by improving human performance, health and wellness, and social participation. So in short, the key to social sustainability is universal design. And why so? Because it not just symbolizes equality and equity, but it kind of tries to achieve it in an incremental way. And it eventually improves the quality of life of people, because people are at the center of this concept. Also, the virtue of universal design is equity and not equality. So this image that you can see on the screen actually differentiates between, also not just equality and equity, but also access and universal design. So by providing, access, we might say that, yeah, there are, we are giving an equal opportunity. But then is the equal opportunity in the way provided in a way that the person needs it? And that is what universal design can offer. These are the virtues of universal design. So it is, a very, very beautiful concept and an underlying value. It is not a theme or a trend. So it can achieve equity, it can achieve health and safety, livability and sustainability and economic sustainability for all kinds of people, right? Now, so far, I have not really mentioned or connected universal design to disability, because, universal design is, its basis is in designing for diversity and not just for persons with disability. But what can it do for persons with disabilities? So it can actually, address the three main emancipatory paths for persons with disabilities, and that is education and employment through education, and hence empowerment through employment and education. So it can actually open unlimited possibilities for persons with disabilities. Now let's look at what is the difference between accessibility and universal design. So accessibility in a way focuses more on persons with disabilities and are more tailor-made kind of I would say band-aid solutions that are integrated into a existing built environment. But universal design is a large encompassing kind of a concept where inclusion is integrated into any design process, right from the initial phase of design, right from the preparation of the brief to the preparation of the whole design requirement to the planning of the space. So that's how accessibility, and this visual on the right, you can see that accessibility could be provided in terms of physical terms, but does not guarantee that it will still work, because there might be a societal barrier that is still not addressed. Whereas universal design, since it acknowledges that all people are equal and there is diversity for which we need to design, so all kinds of barriers automatically get addressed. So I would say universal design is a more evolved concept that can get us closer to inclusion rather than accessibility. But yes, accessibility is the first stepping stone towards universal design. So this is another image. I think we have less time, so I will not really talk about it. Apurva ma'am, do you want me to share some examples of universal design?
Yes, ma'am, that would be great, in fact.
Yeah. So let's look at 2 or 3 examples so that we understand the concept of universal design more clearly. So we can see here now, this is an example of a curb cut. So a curb cut, very rarely found in India though, but yeah, I mean, hopefully now with the smart city thing and with universal design being a mandate in the smart city agenda also, we will be able to see these curb cuts. These are sloped kind of conditions in the footpath is sloped down to reach to the road level. So you can see it here. Now, as evidently it might feel that a curb cut idea is basically to enable wheelchair users to come up and down the footpath from the road. But look at the numerous kinds of people that it can help. So it can help strollers, or young mothers, using a pram, or it could be used by skaters to go up and down. It can be used by senior citizens who may have issues with mobility. Then it can be also used by young enthusiasts, cyclists, to negotiate between the footpath or the cycling path and the road crossings. And of course, it can help, people who are carrying luggage, or, carrying trolleys, or, cleaning, having equipments to clean the street infrastructure. So a curb cut, even if the idea emerges from, providing it for people with wheelchairs, it helps numerous kinds of people and activities and functions. And hence, this is an example of universal design. So universal design not just helps, those who are vulnerable, but helps public at large. Another example that I would like to share here is the closed captioning. So closed captioning, all of us know, these are text versions of the spoken part. It could be a TV, something that you're watching on the television, or a computer presentation, or anything. And these captions have come basically, the idea has come from enabling people who have hearing impairment to be able to understand and communicate. But look at the kind of people that it can benefit. So it has helped definitely you or me also, while we probably were watching a regional film, where we don't understand the language, or maybe we're in a crowded situation where we might have to keep the video on mute, or simply where the accent is different, or the speed of talking is in such a way that it's difficult to catch words and things like that. So there has been a lot of study that closed captions also have helped numerous kinds of people, and people really feel more comfortable with videos or presentations having closed captions. So this again becomes another example of universal design and its benefits of catering to needs of all. Third example that I would like to share is of an audio and visual alarm. So an audio visual alarm is a recommendation given by universal design specialists for disaster management or emergency preparedness in buildings or built environments. And generally we have just audio alarms, but by providing audio and visual alarms, obviously you're going to be able to help a person who may not be able to hear an audio alarm. But at the same time, it can also help a person who is probably engrossed into work, or is listening to something with headphones and may miss out on the audio as announcements or otherwise. So again, universal design solutions help people of all kinds and in all kinds of situations. So these are the kind of goals that universal design tries to address. It enhances body fit, it enhances comfort, it provides consideration for different awareness levels. Different people at different stages of life have different levels of understanding, different levels of awareness, alertness, wellness, and all that gets catered to in the concept of universal design. How does universal design get applied into a design process? So there are 7 principles, like you can see on the screen. So equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive to use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space for approach and use. So I don't think there'll be time to explain each one of them, but let me tell you, all these principles are beautiful concepts. Again, have been evolved by looking at subtle aspects of human actions and human, I would say, interaction with the space and the design. And when, subtle to that level that even a concept like tolerance for error, for example, addresses accidents that may have happen by humans inadvertently. Like, for instance, if I'm walking up the stairs in a dark room or walking down the stairs, I might skip a step and fall. Right now, this could happen because of dim lighting conditions, also, or maybe simply because you are engrossed in some thoughts. And there, the tolerance of error actually comes to help in the form of a railing, a handrail that we, instinctively go and catch to avoid an accident. So that's the beauty of universal design. And when we talk about low physical effort or size and space for approach and use or perceptible information, there are ample examples of universal design that demonstrate that it is not just the physical impairment that is addressed, but it is also the sensory impairments and the intellectual impairments. So disability in all forms automatically gets addressed. And where all can it be applied? So it can be applied in the creation or design of built environment and public spaces, in information communication and interpretation, port mobility and related infrastructure, and in public conveniences and services. I've been listening to these conversations and insights given by experts. Last two experts. I missed the introductory session, though. I regret that. But they've been talking about spatial, again, strategies to facilitate access, to facilitate equal opportunity to education. Also, the speaker who talked on gender. Again, the whole idea of an accessible environment can actually facilitate access for not just disability in the form of physical or sensory or intellectual, but also for gender issues. Like, for instance, a unisex accessible toilet, for that matter, caters and acknowledges that there is a third gender too, and there has to be a toilet provided in addition to the conventional ladies and gents toilet, so that we don't exclude a person who may be, not falling into the conventional gender types. So these examples were shown to just share with you that it is not just a need of the disabled, but it is a need for all and problematic for none. So that's the beauty of, universal design. So I think it was a long answer, but ma'am, I hope that I have been able to give the participants a good idea about what is access and what is universal design and how they can enable or reduce disability. Yeah.
Not at all, ma'am. That was an exceptional answer. In fact, I was reading about Ron Mace, in fact.
Yeah.
And I remember him talking about universal design in such, just like how you explained it, it's so simple. We need design tweaks to make everybody capable, right? And I remember reading about this phrase which said, we are all temporarily able. And that's exactly what went in my head when you spoke about falling down the stairs. We're all temporarily able. So that's great, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, see, disability, not everybody is born with disability, right? I mean, you could acquire disability. And the probability of acquiring disabilities, I think, equals for everybody. So it could be, even if, you may be lucky not to have disability probably for a major part of your life, but nobody is going to escape acquiring disabilities in the fag end of their life with, the aging certainly being a part of the life cycle.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it really helps us look beyond disability as we understand. So this dissociation which, there is somebody, and I think that's also been perpetuated by imagery of disabled people like, Divyangjan and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So ma'am, how did you come across it? So it wasn't a very popular it still isn't in India. So how did you come across this idea and want to take it up?
Yeah. To be frank, Apurva, I mean, most of the people who work in the disability sector are people who are touched by disability, I would say, or who are fortunate or unfortunate. I don't know. For me, I would say fortunate to encounter or to kind of have an experience of close experience of disability. But I still wouldn't want to use the word disability again, because but I'm still not very comfortable in using the term differently abled as well. It's simply differences, I would say. And it all happened when my son was diagnosed with autism when he was 1.5 years old. And that was when I, started looking at the world with a completely different perspective. And then the whole, string of, actions that happened after that, visiting hospitals for his for the early intervention, and then the therapies that followed, and then looking at other parents and other forms of disability in those kind of visits and experiences, opened my eyes to this whole the spectrum of disability, that and the way it impacts individuals and families. And at the same time, since I was a practicing architect and also an educator, so it forced me to contemplate, whether we have really as architects been mindful about this reality. And it wasn't at all anywhere covered into our education or in, of course, and hence not into the practice as well. And I thought that it was a huge, missing link, or a big gap, between what architecture must really do and what it was doing. So we understand architecture as something much more than just an aesthetical kind of experience. It has the power to transform lives and to make a social impact. But I could see that it was completely, missing out on this reality, and in fact creating disabilities, even if not enabling people. So that's how I started my journey. So it started with self-learning and, reading more, reaching out to people who are working on this concept worldwide. And just one thing and after the other just went on, and I went on deeper and deeper into it. So while my son was growing up and I was growing up with him, universal design became more of a mission. It started and a passion now. It started just from the point of view of a concern. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's given us a person who's going to talk about inclusive design in India, because I think Indians don't talk about it very much. And you were saying about the smart city campaigns.
Actually, I'll tell you, sorry to interrupt you, Apurva, but yeah, this is a huge issue. Parents don't even accept. There is a big issue because the social stigma is so much that parents most of the times don't even accept the condition. So and it is reinforced further by the denials that come from the society, and most of the times they come because of lack of access. So my son, for example, I mean, he was denied admission into conventional schools because he was not really having a very severe disability, so he could be accommodated into conventional schools. But their excuse was that we don't have access to the way we should teach children like him. So that's what it is, and that was what I encountered 15 years back, and today again I'm so sorry to say that we are still in the same situation, talking about the whole question of inclusive education and what and how. Yeah,
it has gained some momentum, but definitely not enough. Definitely not enough. In fact, ma'am, when you were talking ki architecture mein we don't talk about design and disability, I think it's similar with law. Despite it being a purely social science, we have really overlooked disability. So even though we've had legislations in place, so you signed the UNCRPD, which is the Convention on People with Disability, and we now have the new Act in 2016, which has lots of jargon language, I feel. It's got accessibility and reasonable accommodation. So, ma'am, how do you think we will, and it's a relatively new act, so there's a lot of scope. So how do you think that we can implement the act, and what are the barriers and what are the things we should look at first with this RPWD Act?
Yeah. So, see, do you want me to just first take the audience, the participants through what the RPWD mandates in terms of accessibility?
That will be great.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like you rightly said, this whole idea um, of embedding accessibility as a right for persons with disability has already a lot of legal kind of roots in it. Especially after disability started being looked at as a access being looked at as a human right, and it started with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, where we acknowledge that everybody, all human beings, must get equal rights because they are born free and they are equal. And then a number of international commitments and guidelines followed, which again mandated the inclusion of people with disabilities. Initially, the discussion was by providing a barrier-free society. So you can see here, the Declaration of Full Participation and Equality of People with Disabilities, 2000, and then eventually the Vivaco Millennium Framework, which mandated providing a barrier-free and right-based society. And the discussion continued, and then finally it came in the form of the United Nations Convention on Right for Persons with Disabilities, which mandated that all persons with disability must get equal opportunities for enjoyment of all rights and fundamental freedom. And the Indian strategy then gave the participatory countries from Asia and Pacific the modalities or the ways in which one could actually achieve it. Its implication, of course, had also on the Indian scenario, the legal scenario. Then till the Convention on Right for Persons with Disabilities was passed, we had the Right for Persons with Disability Act 1995, which was quite toothless, and it really had numerous issues, right from the discriminatory or derogatory language that was used to the way accessibility was actually was just a recommendation and not a mandate. But RPWD Act 2016, which was based on Convention of Right for Persons with Disability, actually has made the concern or the need of accessibility or provision of accessibility as a legal mandate, and it comes with clauses that make it clear that any breach of right to access can lead to penalization. And that led to a number of other kind of snowball initiatives such as Accessible India campaign and the revision of National Building Code of India 2016, the National Urban Transport Policy that also got eventually revised, and in recently the SDGs also have given a lot of momentum to the exercising or the operationalization of RPWD Act 2016. I won't talk about UNCRPD, but I would directly take you to what RPWD Act mandates. Okay, so there are two ways in which RPWD actually mandates that accessible environments need to be created. One is, of course, through accessibility, and the other is the concept of reasonable accommodation. I'll first explain how it has mandated accessibility. These are the principles of the UNCRPD, which have been incorporated into the Rights of Persons with Disability Act also, where very clearly now disability has been acknowledged as a part of human diversity and humanity, and dignity is something that is mandated as well. So how we provide access is extremely important in terms of defining or assuring and ensuring that dignity is protected. Under the RPWD Act, there are 21 different types of disabilities that have been covered. So these are the 21 types, but these are the broad categories. So you can see here locomotor or mobility related disabilities, sensory disabilities such as visual, hearing, and speech disabilities, developmental disorders and intellectual disability and mental behavior, all these come under the intellectual disabilities. And some diseases or disorders have also been incorporated into the definition of disability because they lead to permanent conditions wherein a person's functionality gets limited. Now, I'll start with what the RPWD mandates for educational institutes. So you can see here in the bracket, I'm not going to read through everything, but just take you to the highlights. So it clearly says that buildings, campuses, and facilities need to be made accessible and provide reasonable accommodation according to the individual's requirements. Same is mandated in workplace accessibility, where it says appropriate barrier-free and conducive environment needs to be provided for employees with disabilities. Healthcare also mandates barrier-free access in all the healthcare centers, hospitals, clinics, etc., etc. In terms of culture and recreation as well, it demands accessible spaces, recreational centers, as well as technology assistive devices and equipments to facilitate access and inclusion. So it's not just mandating accessibility in its physical terms, but also in its other forms. Sporting venues, similarly, accessibility to transport, where you can see here facilities for persons with disabilities at bus stops, railway stations, airports need to comply with the accessibility standards provided as per the National Building Code. Access to information and communication technology. Similarly, even consumer goods, need to be designed and produced and distributed in a way that they are universally, usable and accessible. So it actually has, in a way, addressed most of the areas of intervention, I would say. And this is what it mandates in terms of how to observe accessibility. So clause number 44 very clearly says that no establishment should be granted permission to build any structure if the building plan does not adhere to the rules formulated by the central government. Okay, so clearly no completion certificate or occupational certificate should be given to any building if it does not comply with all the accessibility requirements, is what it says. Also, not just stopping at providing accessibility in terms of the requirements, standards that are provided, but also a time limit has been given. So you can see here in 2016, it was mandated that all existing public buildings need to be made accessible within a period not exceeding 5 years. Now we are already in 2021, and what the ground reality is, and it also very clearly defines who is responsible and what is the role of the appropriate government and the local authorities. And all this is applicable not just to the government, but also to private organizations. So the RPWD has clearly, removed that that question of whether it is applicable to a private or enterprise or no. Then the second concept that it talks about is reasonable accommodation. So basically, what is reasonable accommodation? So reasonable accommodation is, is more pertaining to an individual, whereas accessibility is pertaining to, creating a condition so that no person with disability encounters with any barriers. Whereas reasonable accommodation is a I would say strategy, or is a communication or an adjustment that is made when a person with a disability is introduced in a particular environment. Okay, so it is an accommodation which is made in the form of a change in the workplace or the learning place or any other functional space, so that it enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal employment opportunities. So examples could be in the form of providing sign language interpreters for people who are deaf, or it could be in the form of fixing maybe a furniture to suit the person as per his needs, or it could be in the form of creating educational materials such as websites, books, journals, etc., videos which are accessible, or to provide the facility of a scribe for maybe a person with visual impairment while giving examinations, etc., or while working in the workspace. So reasonable accommodation has very I would say specific interventions. It is it's given as a alternative to the idea of access in the law, with this with this concern, or that probably there will be some situations where accessibility may not be able to instantly be provided, or maybe the environment has limitations in terms of modifying or retrofitting for accessibility. So but the issue is the whole interpretation about what is reasonable accommodation, how it should be provided. And people there is a great possibility that reasonable accommodation it can be looked at as an alternative to accessibility compliance, and people are just making specific person oriented interventions to accommodate a person with disability, thus not really looking at a more long term kind of a vision of creating an inclusive environment where any person with disability in future can also be accommodated without any issue. So that is the difference between reasonable accommodation, and that is something that is really the challenging part, and people are interpreting it in different ways. I talked about Accessible India campaign as an offshoot of the RPWD Act 2016 revision and amendment, and this was an initiative by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment under the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, wherein 50 cities across the country were identified, and 50 each from each city, 50 buildings were government buildings were identified for carrying out access audits to evaluate the current status of accessibility that they offer. And accessibility experts were identified from across the country. I was fortunate to be identified as one of the 17 who have been empaneled. And we did extensive access audits across the country, across cities, looking at different typology of buildings, and looking at the accessibility related issues and barriers, and provided also solutions and design strategies that could make them accessible. And I'm really happy to share that in Maharashtra, we have been, we as one of the access specialists have been able to retrofit more than 250 buildings and make them accessible. But that was just the phase one, and it was supposed to be continued by the state governments and the city municipalities. But if you ask me what is the progress, absolutely very, very less progress. So Accessible India campaigns, interventions, or where in these three components: built environment accessibility, transportation system accessibility, and information and communication accessibility. And yeah, that's what I already discussed about. Making accessible government buildings was the first phase. So the mandate is that accessibility is not a choice, but it is a compulsory compliance. But if we talk about how effective RPWD has been in actually creating, changing the ground reality for persons with disabilities, well, sadly, very less. Though yes, it has definitely moved, few inches ahead. The main problem being that disability or accessibility was actually initiated by the central government, and we being a federal kind of a government system, the RPWD Act has not been notified by numerous states. Even Maharashtra just recently notified RPWD, and there are so many states who have still not notified it. So obviously, if you've not notified it, your entire government mechanism, your urban governance is not going to change, right? So, I mean, simplest example would be, have city bylaws changed to incorporate accessibility guidelines and standards into the mandatory provisions. No. So even today, because the city bylaws do not mandate accessibility, there are buildings coming up which do not have accessibility in place. And that is the main challenge of RPWD, the operationalization, the actual implementation. Though the Act may have few loopholes, but I would say even with whatever, amendments have happened compared to the last version of the Act, certainly a lot of changes can happen, and a lot of inclusive environments can be created, opportunities can be created, but the implementation is the big issue, and there is lack of leadership, lack of political willpower, lack of coordination between different departments. So the how of exercising RPWD is something that is really missing and doesn't seem to be a priority. But yes, thanks to a number of advocates and a lot of activism from groups that from the disability sector as well as outside who believe in ensuring accessibility, that there are certain changes happening. And I think, but the onus is not just on the government and the law, but the society has to awaken and acknowledge this need and participate in this whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ma'am, actually, I would love to carry on this conversation with you. We have a lot of questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
So if you give the go ahead, we'll take some of the questions.
Yes. Let's do that.
Great.
Yeah.
So our student host Anupam will be taking them. Anupam,
sure.
over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Those were some brilliant insights you provided us with. So now we'll be moving forward with the Q&A round. Ma'am, the very first question that I see here is by Ms. Rachna Verma. How do we tackle bullying in case of a disabled employee who is hesitant or scared to speak up in a workplace?
Okay. So the RPWD, very clearly protects the rights of persons with disabilities. One has to really, stand or speak for oneself. Okay, so that is something that has to happen as an attitudinal or a mindset shift at the end of persons with disability themselves. Most of the persons disabilities don't even know their rights, and I'm not just talking about the uneducated, but I'm talking about the fairly educated people as well, and they are hardly aware and educated about their own rights, and hence they cannot. They are not in a position to demand for their rights, and of course they can certainly lodge a complaint, and the company can come into serious, or the person who is bullying can come into serious problems because the law takes severe concern, or serious concern of such kind of breaches. So I would say there is no need to be fearful, and one should really not accept such kind of, be intolerant with such kind of experiences and abuse. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And here I would actually, also like to take the opportunity to talk about the role of, institutions imparting education in law. Right, said that if there is some kind of an social outreach or social outreach program for persons with disabilities carried out by law institutions for educating them, making them aware about their rights and entitlements, I think it can help people at large. And of course, I mean, there can be a help desk as well, just to help out people who may need legal kind of guidance. Yeah.
Definitely, ma'am. So the next question we have from Ms. Vidisha, and it says, how do we eliminate the stigma and misconceptions that people with disabilities are incapable of performing a task?
Yeah. So I think more and more, I mean, it is not a linear path. We'll have to do number of things simultaneously. At one end, we have to empower persons with disabilities with opportunities for education and employment. Okay. Obviously, for that, you need accessible environments. So you have to create accessible environments, not just in terms of the buildings they would visit for learning or for working, but also, the city infrastructure that they would have to, kind of negotiate through to reach their places of, learning or work. So, I mean, at one end, we have to create accessible environments, okay, so that people with disabilities can become visible. They are invisible because they cannot come out of their houses. And hence all those, the stigmas and stereotypes and assumptions about them and, all those, I would say, biases about them. So one end, you're creating physical accessible environments. At the other end, you're creating institutions for, educating them, empowering them. So I'm not saying create special institutions, but where are the vocational training institutes which include persons, youth with disabilities? Right? We don't have them, and nor are there vocations which can. I mean, where is the study in which can be used to include particular vocations which can be applicable for persons with disabilities, right? So we have to create such kind of institutions where persons with disabilities can be educated and eventually made employable, so that they can live an independent and dignified life. And once they start living an independent and dignified life, then automatically the society will have to change gradually. And mindsets can't be changed. It'll take, I think the slowest would be the shift in the mindset, okay, but then it has to be kind of catalyzed with these kind of and of course constant awareness, constant sensitization of people at large. Start with the students. Start young. Maybe this generation difficult to change, but the next generation can definitely be sensitized at a younger age. So the sensitization has to start at a younger age, so that we see that mindset not continuing into the next generation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That answered very well. So the next question that we have here is by Mr. Hemant, and he asks, how would we advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion with colleagues who don't understand its importance?
Yeah. So, number of ways that one can do this. Of course, one can, work one-on-one and try to through a personal experience sharing, talk about the issues that a person with disability goes through. But I think, more than that, some mechanisms at the institutional level can work better. Okay, so workplaces or institutions must have their own diversity and inclusion plans. wherein the intervention or the sensitization does not happen after one actually encounters a person with disability, but one is prepared for it, and as a value, as an embedded principle for interacting with fellow colleagues right when the person is appointed into that particular organization. So every organization, be it a workplace, be it a educational institute, be it a private or social or a government enterprise, must have its own equal opportunity policy, must have its own diversity and inclusion plan, must conduct accessibility, disability orientation programs, must conduct disability etiquette training programs, must have more and more persons with disabilities employed in their workforce. It is mandated by the law as well, but I don't know how many companies. There are just handful who actually have, persons with disabilities employed. But there are, companies like Accenture who have their own D&I, plan policy, and they are aiming at making diversity as their key priority area. They have more than 5% persons with disabilities employed, and they want to reach to a 10%. And plus, they are also aiming at having a 50-50% gender distribution in the staff. So when that kind of an environment starts happening, and you see a person with disability as a colleague performing as much as you, just by probably giving him an accessible environment or assistive technology, then there would be changes in the mindsets. So I think it has to happen top down. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the very last question here is by Ms. Dhani Sastry, and she asked, according to you, are some basic steps that the authorities can take to make places like railway station more inclusive architecturally in India, considering the fact that lakhs travel by locals on a daily basis?
Yes. So, it's not just the question of railway stations, but it is all kinds of public buildings, be it transportation buildings or, office buildings, workplaces, education, that need to. But let me tell you quickly the scope of accessibility. Okay, so the scope of accessibility in a built environment starts right from the entrance gate. Okay, so right from the entrance gate, then you have the external pathways, then you have the entrance points into the building, then to the all the circulation areas. It could be the horizontal or the vertical circulation areas. Then the public conveniences, like maybe the toilets that are provided, the drinking water fountains, the different kind of facilities, including canteens or ticket counters for that matter. Particularly in railway stations, the platforms, then the overhead bridges, crossover bridges, they are a big issue, not just for persons with disabilities, but for us too. And also, and eventually also the kind of the transportation or the transport vehicles, including the design of the train. So I might make the railway station accessible, but if the train is not accessible, again it's a big issue, because मैं platform तक तो पहुंच जाऊंगी, लेकिन platform से मैं train के अंदर कैसे चढ़ूंगी? So number of things that can be done. If you can give me a minute, I can just quickly take you through 2 slides that can tell us कि building accessibility में आता क्या है. Is it okay?
Sure, ma'am. Please go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, though the question is pertaining to a railway station, but these questions are fairly general and can be applied to any building. And of course, there can be some specific questions based on the specific activity or function carried out in the building. So, a building has to have, right from, like I said, an accessible approach, then accessible parking, step-free entrances, accessible receptions or ticket counters or service counters, accessible vertical circulation in the form of lifts, staircases, common amenity areas. If there are dining areas or canteens or cafeterias, they also need to have accessibility. So it has to be ingrained into every component of the built environment. Resting places, toilets, like I said, drinking water fountains, information, signage, the wayfinding directional signages that are provided in the the building, etc. So now let's look at what need to be provided. So you can see here now this first picture is about an external tactile guiding path. So this is a tactile guiding path which comes to help for persons with visual impairment, and it acts as a wayfinding device for them. So that they can move in the built environment without any fear, safely, by independently navigating themselves by using this tactile path. Then accessible parking, so it has a different design, structure, dimensions, etc. But this is how it looks. So demarcated, reserved, accessible parking areas, along with a connection to accessible path that can take one to the building. Double-heighted handrails are another example of accessible provision that needs to be provided. Ramps, of course, to negotiate level differences. Of course, if you minimize or you avoid level differences, then the question of ramps really becomes much less. Handrails in corridors, because you, particularly in a railway station, you will have all kinds of people, right? Small kids to senior citizens, and hence, handrails become handy. Then, of course, again, the tactile guiding path continues in the internal built environment. Doorways have to be accessible. So I'm talking also about, the train doorways, the entry points into the door, the entry points into the toilet, etc., etc. Accessible, unisex accessible toilets of, a size so that a wheelchair user can easily move inside and turn around. Provision of grab bars that go into the accessible toilet, drinking water fountains, which can cater to different heights of people and different age groups of people, including signage. So it has to include braille, tactile, as well as audio signage. Not all people with visual impairment can read braille. Fire and emergency evacuation maps and exit signages, etc. Tactile models and maps, floor directories, so that again, one is not relying on just human assistance all the time, but the environment with its different kinds of accessible measures comes to help to a person who may need help. Braille indicators on handrails, which can tell people with visual impairment about where they are, how they need to move around. Elevators and lifts, of course. Then disability service desks. You can see here, the height of the reception desk has been lowered down so that one is providing access with dignity for wheelchair users. Safety measures like contrast color edge strips and things to identify step differences. Evacuation chairs and small details like lever handles as well. So that's the whole scope of accessibility. So a railway station would have to have all these. In addition to that, of course, measures such as providing escalators or lifts along with these stairs for the crossover bridges. And of course, I think signage is the most conspicuously missing part in the design of railway stations. Yeah, I hope that I answered that briefly.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. And thank you so much, ma'am. I'd like to request my co-host, Mr. Shah, to proceed with delivery.
Sorry to interrupt, but Anupam, you have some technical glitch at your mic. Can you please repeat?
Am I not audible?
Now you're audible.
Yeah, so do I repeat what I just said? Thank you so much, ma'am. We'll now proceed with Ms. Sia Shah delivering the motion.
Yes, we could hear you actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Anupam. Good afternoon, ma'am. I, Sia Shah, would like to take this opportunity to express our sincerest gratitude to you as speaker and for gracing the event with your presence and for taking out your precious time for us. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your exemplary knowledge and insights on creating an inclusive environment for persons with disabilities and shedding light on topics like accessibility and helping us understand the concept of universal design in such an easy manner. Thank you for helping us know the importance of the RPWD Act, the reasons why it is not being implemented so efficiently, and the initiatives that we can take at an individual level to create an inclusive environment for everyone. Thank you, ma'am. I would also
Thank you
like
so
to
much.
thank our.
I
Thank you.
enjoyed the whole conversation as well and the questions. They were really
It
nice.
was an honor. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to thank our faculty moderator, Ms. Apurva Thakur, for her valuable contribution. And I would like to thank our enthusiastic audience